Good evening. Welcome to Sunday Night Live. Before we get started into tonight's message that still is centered around our month of families, I just want to express my deepest pride and just gratefulness at the people that you are. This morning we had about 70 folks who were here because they're connected in some way through the school to our son and to our family. And no one could have represented themselves better as a family and as a welcoming community than the Waterford Church of Christ. We had so many comments in the hallway, Lenore and I together, from different folks who just so impressed with the... One sweet lady said, "How do you create a community of people so friendly?" God is good. And Lenora said, "I don't know, Dave Parks did it." We just inherited it. But I just want to tell you from the depth of our heart, what a joy it is to have a place where you can bring people and know that they're going to be treated kindly and loved. What a joy. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight we are starting into a series just for these 4 weeks of the month of August, where we're going to look on Sunday night at some practical issues that families face. And this is going to be very practical. Okay? We'll talk about some scriptures, and of course we have to look at the theoretical and the larger picture in some way to be able to craft a lesson from the wisdom from the Old and New Testament. But we're going to try to bring it down on a very practical level to things that we can apply in our families day by day. We're going to talk about some issues like parenting in regard to rebellion in our children and how to deal with that. We're going to talk about other things in regard to our marriages. But tonight, we're going to talk about the single greatest problem that statistically is the cause of more divorces than anything else. It is not adultery. It is not violence. It is not abuse or mistreatment. The number one thing that breaks apart marriages is money. Finances. And so we don't talk about it all that often. Oh, we talk in theory when we needed to improve the budget last year. Oh, by the way, I don't know if we've expressed the thanks of the leadership here enough, but you realize we haven't had to talk about that again after we talked about, because you people, you're faithful. Thank you. But we've done great in that. So we maybe have that lesson once a year or once every 5 years or 10 years or however often we need it to talk about stewardship and giving. But oftentimes that's the extent of how often we address the subject of money. But money is an important subject. Finances are an important biblical theme. Do you know there's as much mention in the New Testament around the idea of finances, around the ideas of money and greed and not letting it be your master and so forth and so on? There's as many passages about that as there are about faith in the New Testament. And if you don't believe me that it's important, Jesus Christ was the perfect mentor, the perfect friend, the perfect teacher, the perfect Lord, the perfect Savior, every day for 3 years with 12 men, and he lost one. And he lost him because of money. Why do you think it is that Jesus talked about it so plainly? Now we're going to try to be practical about this as we address it tonight. And I'm just really going to talk about two aspects of it. And I will insert some other opinions as we go, I promise. But we're really going to center on two things. And the first one I'm going to breeze through. And then we're going to center on the last one for the majority of our time. Number one, covetousness. When we look back in Exodus and we examine chapter 20 and verse 17, As we close out the 10 Commandments, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, or covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. The very idea of coveting is rooted in the concept of envy. You know, there's a difference, we've talked about this before, between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is righteous half the time, and it's unrighteous the other half of the time. Jealousy can be good, because the Lord our God, the Bible says, is a jealous God. Because jealousy is when you want what is rightfully yours. Now that can get out of hand. You know, if some fella is being too friendly with what is rightfully mine, then I'm going to take issue with that. Serious issue with that. But if every time anybody says, hello, Lenora, I take issue with that, then my jealousy has gone too far and it's sinful. So there are times when jealousy is right, and there are times when jealousy is wrong. You know, I've had folks come in and say, he or she is just so jealous. And I'll say, well, that's not right or wrong in and of itself. Let's get to the root of it. And sometimes that jealousy is unfounded. It's based on insecurities or mistrust or whatever. But sometimes it's real. Because sometimes it is righteous and good to be jealous. But envy is always wrong. Envy is when you don't want what is rightfully yours, when you crave, when you desire that which is rightfully someone else's, that which is not yours. And covetousness is born of that. Covetousness is that craving, that desire for those things that becomes a priority in a person's life. Now this, like so many other issues in which we have to find balance, which the Christian life that is the best ambassador of Christ and is living in true holiness is generally a life of balance. That's not swinging on the pendulum between extremes. And when it comes to this, we have to find the balance. And if we swing that this is always wrong or these things are always right, when it comes to determining little individual choices in our lives, we're probably not very balanced. But we have to work through this because you know what? Everybody wants things. I mean, just get real, right? Everybody wants things. But there comes a time when this attitude of, boy, I'd really like to have a insert thing, horse. A new horse someday. I'm sorry, I looked at you, Don, and I thought of a horse. If you know Don, you know why. So, boy, I'd really like to have a new horse. Well, is there anything wrong with saying, I'd really like to have a new horse? And thinking about, and doing a little Google search every now and again about what new horses, I don't know what horses cost. I don't know, but what horses cost or what breeds of horses there are. Is there anything wrong? No. But could that become wrong? Could that get out of hand? There's a difference, and it's a subtle, difficult thing to define. But there's a difference of just simply wanting things, having a desire that's not a burning desire, and allowing that to become or transition into covetousness. And I think the way that we define it is this. Covetousness is a consuming desire. Covetousness is a desire for things that overwhelms, that occupies our time, that takes time from other things and thoughts from other things which rightfully should be prioritized in our life. Now, covetousness, you may say, well, how is that a problem in marriages? It is. I have seen it again and again and again and again. Where couples have problems because maybe one is spending too much. That's another problem we're going to get to in just a minute. And the other one who's more of a, how do you say this? What do you call me? Frugal? the word. That's the word I call it. She might use the word cheap or tight or, we have different words for these things. And that's okay too. But can that be taken too far? Yeah. I have seen marriages that failed because one person in that marriage was so consumed with what they were saving for or working for or the house we're going to get someday or we've got to get this or we've got to get this, and the other one spent too much money and they absolutely couldn't keep their marriage together. And you might say, well, that person shouldn't have been so loose with their funds. Yes, and this person shouldn't have been coveting things and prioritizing that over their relationship. You know what? Your spouse matters more than anything you may or may not ever have. When I preached in Oregon, we had a circumstance where we actually had to withdraw fellowship from a lady. And here was their story. She insisted on divorcing her husband. Her husband had worked at a factory, and he had been a bookkeeper for that factory, and he had sinned. He had sifted a little bit in the bookkeeping. And as these things always turn out, he got found out. The company decided not to press charges, but they did insist that all the money, and they made it legal, had to be paid back in full. His wages would be garnished. He would be responsible. It was going to affect his credit and everything else. He came forward. He repented. He wept on the front pew, asked the Lord, his family, and the church to forgive him. And we found out a week later his wife was divorcing him because she didn't do that and she didn't want to bear his debts. Well, let's be very clear. No matter what debts they come with, no matter what responsibilities, your spouse matters more than anything related to money. Is that clear? Can we say it any more plainly? We withdraw from her because she insisted. We tried to counsel, work with her. She pushed it. We withdrew from her because his sin was repented of. Her sin of covetousness was embraced and pursued. You see, covetousness starts with a false assumption that material things will make us happy. And they won't. Oh, don't misunderstand. We're practical in here, so we're not living pie in the sky that material things don't matter. We've been very poor with a car that Lenora had to climb in across the passenger seat at 9 months pregnant because we couldn't afford to get the door handle fixed. And our cars all work well now. You like the cars that work well better? Yes. I've heard somebody say, I can be content when I'm poor and I can be content when I'm rich, but I'd rather be content when I'm rich. Let's be just practically speaking. But the reality is that covetousness assumes that when I get that thing I'm waiting for, when I get that thing I'm wanting, when I get that, whatever it may be, house, car, promotion, whatever it is, that then I will have arrived and it will satisfy some emptiness. It won't. It creates a bigger hole. Creates a bigger emptiness. There have been billionaires. I think it was, Getty or Vanderbilt, one of the two, was interviewed. And they asked him, you have everything in the world. Is there anything you don't have that you want? And he looked across the table with all seriousness and said, yes, I crave one more dollar. And I promise you, he died an empty man. Covetousness assumes that those things will make us happy. The antithesis of covetousness, the remedy for covetousness in Scripture, is called contentment. Paul says, I have learned to be content in all circumstances. I have been in need and I have had plenty. And then he'll talk about, for I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That great verse of victory, of encouragement to all of us, is in the context of being able to be content. And you see, that is the remedy. That is the very thing that we pursue. That's why there's so much emphasis throughout the New Testament on being a people who are content. That doesn't mean we're people who aren't ambitious. That doesn't mean we wouldn't say, yeah, this is what I have and I like it. Now, if I had that, I'd like that too. And maybe I will someday. I speak from this, and there's things I speak to you about that I personally struggle with. But in this regard, I think my family would attest, I've been able to find contentment when it comes to material things, and it's frustrated them at times. It does. Seth's shaking his head over here because he's like, Dad, why do you think that we have the best house? They'll talk about, well, their house is so, yeah, but our house is just great. That's what I'll say. And everywhere we've lived. And I said, because it's mine. And you better be happy because I think I got the best son too. And neither one are based upon objective criteria, okay? They're based upon the fact that this is what I have. This is what I have. I'm happy with it, Folks, contentment is peace. And when you're really content, when you get something more or you get something better, you can be happy with it. Then it won't be an empty hole. Then it'll be like, oh, wow. Look at the blessings. Staying away from covetousness by pursuing contentment. The second thing tonight, and this is where we really get practical, is the danger of debt. Debt is the slave master of our capitalist culture. Most Americans have a master named Visa and another one named MasterCard, maybe American Express, or it may call itself a credit line or a home equity. But it's all just different masks held by the same slave master. Debt. I was reading just today that the average American household that carries a balance has a $16,000 debt on their credit cards. Americans have a $3.4 trillion total indebtedness on credit cards. Now, if you need to understand this, I also saw this, and it blew my mind. Seth couldn't believe it when I told him. He said, that has to be an untrue statistic. If it is, I'm sorry, but I found it on Google, so it has to be true. But if you were to stack $100 bills, you know how much a trillion is? You know our national debt is $19 trillion. Do you know what a terrible example we set as a nation? $19 trillion. Do you know how much $1 trillion is? You know, there are no trillionaires in the world. I know, there are some billionaires in the world. But there are no trillionaires. You know why that is? It's just so unachievable, the amount of money that it is. According to what I read, and Google never lies, is that if you were to just stack them like money, $100 bills, guess how high it would be? How far was it? 67 miles high. $1 trillion. That's what I call a master. Chains. Shackles. And the Bible agrees. Because when you look back through the Bible, particularly as you look at the wisdom literature of Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the words of some of the wisest that ever lived, inspired by the Holy Spirit, try to impact us on the fact that debt is a dangerous thing. You look over in Proverbs chapter 6 that was read for us, And this text, if you didn't catch it, has everything to do with this word surety. And the word surety means collateral or a guarantee. Really what it's talking about is, in essence, co-signing, standing as surety for another person. But really, whether it's co-signing for someone else or signing your name for yourself, it's still surety. It's still a debt. It's still a promise, a guarantee of something you do not have presently to repay. And so he's talking about the dangers, and it's a warning, a stern warning. My son, if you become surety for a friend, if you have shaken hands in a pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the mouth of your own mouth, by the words of your own mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. He says, this is what you do. If you've made a mistake and you've gotten into this debt, in this surety, you go to whoever it is that can get you out of it, if that means to pay it back, if that means to renegotiate the terms, whatever, and you beg them to fix it. Because this is a danger. It's a danger. And when you look, I have seen so many times people come in the office, husband and wife, and we'll get started in conversation, and I know we're going to start at some point to get to the core of their issues, and the core of their issues really end up, and you can tell in the first 2 or 3 minutes, it's going to have to do with money. And it's generally because of debt. Debt is a stress that God's people don't need. Now you say, preacher, how do we live in this world without debt? Well, I think we have to, again, apply the principle of balance. You know, when we think about how many people are so over their heads in debt, yet they keep digging the hole deeper. That's what amazes me, is people will say, you know, I just can't hardly handle my payments. Well, then why are you still using the card? People dig it so deep. I heard a funny story about a fellow who, his wife's wallet was stolen, and he had checked, and sure enough, somebody was using her credit cards, and he called the police, and he said, well, I got to report a robbery. My wife's wallet was stolen. And they said, well, sir, we'll get right on that. And he said, well, you don't have to get right on it. They're spending less than she does. The debt has become a prison to so many people. It shackles people's ability to live in peace and to do good things in their life. The wise man works hard, here's the thing, and is patient for tomorrow. He's patient for tomorrow. I can tell you this, and many people don't ever really realize the joy of actually saving and paying. Oh, it's a joy. But do you know why it is that more Americans don't own an elephant? Do you know why that is? Because no one's offering an elephant for $1 down in easy monthly payments. If they did, we would buy our furniture that way. We buy our cars that way. We buy our, you can go and get a Sears card and put your Craftsman tools on it. Just about everywhere now has Seth and I, we like to play cards, and we went down to a little card shop that it's not like that kind of cards, okay. Just a little fun game we play together. And there's a shop that sells, and they said, would you like to put that on your credit account? And their clientele are like 14-year-olds and 45-year-old preachers. Come on. But they're already telling them you can put it on your account. And you wonder, why do we get in this circumstance? Because we have the idea that I can have everything I want in the now and pay for it in the tomorrow. And folks, that's not smart. And it's really not godly. Now, that doesn't mean it's always wrong to have a loan, okay? We're not trying to be extreme about this. Dave Ramsey would tell you that it's even wrong to have your house debt. Well, I don't know about you, but if Lenore and I saved up and bought our house, we would have bought a house in Michigan in about the year 2086, okay? Paying rent and then waiting to buy a house. I mean, I understand. That's not, but a house is a little bit different. A house is a debt that you understand if you didn't make a mistake, Don Robinson, where is he? Right here. If you didn't make a mistake in buying it, you should still have your money in the house, right? It should still be worth. Now name me another debt that's that way. So real estate, that's good debt in a sense. You have the money to pay back the lender if you need to, correct? Hopefully, in theory. Are there any other kind of good debt? Well, sometimes you got to have an education. But that's getting out of hand with different people, isn't it? You know what? Sometimes you can go to this school or this school and you end up with the same thing. But this one's got really a pretty campus. So it'll only be another $78,000 in student loans. You know, or I really like their football team. And y'all know it's really hard for me to say this because I'm big about football teams, okay? But that's not a reason to go to a school and pay the money. Our society's getting out of hand. Now, is some education a good debt? If it's an investment and it makes you something back, then yes, that makes sense. A business sometimes is a very sensible thing. But, you know, a lot of the things we justify, and I'm going to get real here, and I live in car country, so this is really dangerous for me. But sometimes people are driving things they can't afford, right? And they make all kinds of excuses. Well, I've got to have something dependable. Borrow my Suburban. 228,000 miles. And we'll take it to my daughter's graduation this week. I promise you it will not break down. Hopefully. It's dependable. You know why? Maintenanced it every single time it was supposed to. New shocks when it needed them. And you know what? It's going to wear out someday. So I can do this. I can buy a new Suburban. If you can afford it, buy it. It's fine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about if you can't afford it. But if you need a Suburban, guess what you can do? How much is a new Suburban? Anyway, some of you guys who work for GM, you know. Huh? 70? Is that fair? Huh? 60? $60,000 is a low end one, I'd say, probably. Right? $60,000. You can buy mine. The book value on mine is $1,000. How much is a new engine? Rebuilt? 5? Probably? 6, 7? Okay, even if it's real expensive, are you going to get to $60,000? Not even close. You can repair an old one forever before you ever get the price of a new one. I mean, you just can. It's a hassle. Doing the smart thing is often a hassle. Right? Now, I'm not suggesting you do that if you can afford it. If you want that Suburban and you can afford it, buy it and loan it to me to go to my daughter's graduation. If you can afford it, buy it. No problem. And I'm not saying that we have to be balanced. Somebody might need a loan for that sometimes. And you can afford that, no problem. And if you got in a pinch, you could pay it off. Or you could pay enough down where it'd be worth more. You got to be careful because those things depreciate. They don't hold their value and go up. You could maybe, if you paid enough down, you could sell it and pay off the lender. Okay, there may be a lot of scenarios where that's perfectly fine. But what's probably not fine is just because you want something and they're going to give you zero down and $1,100 a month, which is what that would be. And you buy it because you've always wanted one, and I just graduated college, and I deserve something new and good. And I mean, honestly, the way people, these are practical lessons, right? That's how people think. That's how people act. And that's why they say, go ahead, put on the shackles. Bank, I'm willing to be your slave. Because that's what debt becomes. That's what debt is. If it's not a debt, you have the means to pay back. So when we look at this and consider all the scriptures say, it tells us the wise man is patient. He works for what is his. Back in that text in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 and following, he says, what's the solution to this taskmaster of debt? He says, go, you ant. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides and supplies in the summer and gathers food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise up from your sleep? A little slumber, a fodder for the hands of the sleep. And so shall your poverty come on you like a robber, and your need like an armed man. He says, no. The ant doesn't wait until winter and go down and get a credit line to make it through winter. He saves up all summer. So he's prepared for the winter. And I'll tell you, if you are one of those good-hearted, well-meaning people who haven't realized what a danger debt is, and like so many in our culture, you just live month to month, paycheck to paycheck, and it's just a constant revolving nightmare of going to the, well, I guess it all comes by email now, opening up your email to see this month's bills. Then I can't tell you what a sublime joy it will be if ever you can turn it around. And whatever it is you would desire, not covet, but desire, and you save. Save. Imagine whatever your car payment is. What if you made that payment to yourself? Just put it in the bank every month and drove your $1,000 Suburban and watched it grow. Then guess what? Someday you'd be able to go down to the lot and you'd be able to pay for one. In less amount of time than you'd have to pay for one and pay them interest on it. And then guess what? Then when it's paid off, it's not depreciated because it's brand new. It doesn't have $200,000. And you say, preacher, people can't really do that. Yes, they can. I won't ask for hands, but there are people in this auditorium I know, great many people, who do that. Who when they want something, when they need something, they save for it. It can be done. And the Bible says it should be done. It should be done. Now we're getting down to brass tacks with this, and I'm going to close out with just a few other practical suggestions. Money will be your master if you don't master money. I think one of the greatest enslaving things that people have is that little card in your wallet that says Visa debit over the top of it. I'm not saying it's wrong. Again, we're balanced. There are circumstances, there are people who can use those very responsibly. But my friend in Arkansas was the president of a local bank. And I was talking to him, we were good friends, and we talked about financial things sometimes. And he told me, he says, what actually happened was there was a mistake. Somebody had given me a check. They had given me a bad check. It caused a problem in my account. I had an overdraft fee. And I don't generally do that. But I had an overdraft fee. And I called him. He's my friend. Goes to deacon in the church, president of the bank. He said, I'll take that off, no problem. And so the next time we were eating lunch, I got talking to him about it. And I said, well, that was nice of you to take that off. He said, oh, yeah. He said, you're not our bread and butter on that. He says, our bank only stays open because of the thousands of people who bounce $40 and $50 a month. Now, some of you went, and some of you went. Or 10, 12 a month, 13 a month at $34 a piece. And he said, our bank, and he said, we talk about this in our corporate meetings. Our bank would fold if it wasn't for relying upon people's irresponsibility with their money. And your bank has the same model, folks. Every time you bounce one of those things, every time you swipe that card and you don't know, and you ask someone, well, what do you have in your account? And they swipe, I don't know, I'll check it on my phone after we eat. Folks, when you check your balance on your phone, I'm amazed. They don't teach home economics in school anymore. That was like the most important class. Taught you how to balance a checkbook. Folks, balancing a checkbook is not checking the balance on your phone. It isn't. Because you could have swiped that thing, or you could have written checks, or there could be automatic drafts, or there could be all sorts of things that haven't been taken out yet. That's just the balance at some point. But that doesn't mean it is at this point. You have to keep track of it. Now, I don't advise. I use a credit card for everything. Don't even own a debit card. Credit card for everything. To the tune of, I live here, and my kids live in Alabama and Arkansas, and we like to see them. Lenora really likes to see them. So she told me, if you move me up to Michigan, I have to be able to go see my kids whenever I want. And this old boy can't buy those plane tickets. So you know what? My credit card, if you pay everything you have on it, then get quite a few free plane tickets. But I'm not advising y'all to do that. Because let me tell you what it entails. At the beginning of the month, I know how much we have budgeted for all these different things we spend money on our cards for. And I deposit that much into an account just to pay that. And then I divide it on my phone between different accounts. They aren't real accounts, they're fictional accounts. But all together, they add up to the amount we can spend on the credit card that month. And when we go to Taco Bell, which Seth does 11 times a week, Seth, what do you do when you use that card? How do you communicate that to me? You text me. Taco Bell, 6:14. Yeah, I wish 6:14. And you know what I do every single time? I open the app. It takes about 11 seconds. Minus eating out. Boom. Subtract. Taco Bell, 6:14. Enter. And what used to be $312 is now whatever $312 is minus 6:14. You understand? And you say, that's a lot of work, preacher. Yep. You know what work is called? What we used to call work? Responsibility. Money is entrusted to the responsible. And so this may seem a little tough, but Daniel is the boss of this month. And he told me, I want you to be practical. So here it is. Get control of your finances if you want your marriage to be the best it can be. Work on it together. Weed out covetousness. Pursue a sense of contentment. It's okay to want. But when you want, don't be covet. Be content with what you have, regardless if you ever have anything more. And then when you have more, you'll be thrilled with it. And manage your money closely. More than just checking your balance. Manage it. Be a steward. That's what the Bible calls it. Be responsible and say no to the taskmaster. Because those chains look sweet, when you're driving that thing off the lot, or when you're swiping that card for that new dress, or when you're whatever it may be, those chains don't look too bad, do they? Until the bills start coming in. And you realize, I'm not master of this transaction. I'm slave. No man can serve two masters, for he will love the one and hate the other. Man cannot serve both God and mammon, or, as we would say, God and money. Isn't it funny he used the word serve? Tonight, this really hasn't inspired much of an invitation, I would figure. But if there is any need or issue in your life, please know that we want to help you. We want to encourage you. If it's appropriate to bring it forward, we'll pray for you. If it's more appropriate to talk to someone individually, if this issue is an area in which you need counseling or help or support, the church here, we have a lot of capable people here who want to help you to get on track and throw away those shackles. If you need to come for any reason, come right now as we stand and as we sing.